When you ask your average Star Trek fan what their favorite episode is, you'll usually get answers like the original series is City on the Edge of Forever, Next Gen's Best of Both Worlds, or even DS9's In the Pale Moonlight. And although those are really good episodes, I think one gets overlooked an awful lot. Now, this episode is from what I consider not only the greatest Star Trek series of all time, but probably the greatest television show of all time, and that's Star Trek Voyager. The episode I'm talking about is titled Threshold. Now, if you haven't watched Star Trek Voyager, it's a show that takes place in the 24th century. It follows the adventures of the USS Voyager, and what some could have called a remake of Lost in Space per se, Lost in Space was really kind of boring, where Voyager, it's action packed on almost every week. Lost in Space had a bunch of characters that were kind of lifeless, kind of forgettable. Voyager had a bunch of interesting, fully fleshed, fully realized characters. Ensign Kim, Commander Chakotay, being two of them that really stood out to me. Cass, also very interesting alien. Where I would say she probably rivaled Spock in terms of the complexity of the character. So when you band all of those characters together on a ship that's stranded far away from the Federation, it really, to me, just made me tune in every week to follow these adventures. So when the episode first starts, we follow one of the characters. His name is Tom Paris. Now, this guy is the ace pilot of the Federation. I think Anakin Skywalker, when he was younger, just Starfleet version. And that's kind of what you have here. Like, this guy is just crack shot with a shuttlecraft. Any piloting skills, per se. But he basically figures out how to go past Warp 10, or get to Warp 10, which is the warp barrier. And even though we've never heard that before in Starfleet, and it's kind of made up for this episode, I thought that was wonderful. And even though they never led up to it in any type of capacity, I thought the surprise of, whoa, what are we talking about? Like, to me, that just hook, line, and sinker, stuff like that happens all the time in Voyager, and it really makes you think. Anytime I have to turn my brain on and actually think about the plot or the characters, or what they're actually saying, I mean, that's just genius. Usually when you watch episodes of something, you have to turn your brain off because you just can't think about the easy simpletons of the story. With Voyager, you really have to think about some of this stuff, and I really loved how engaging it was. Now, the thing about this, they actually got to Warp 10. And so they bring the shuttlecraft back to the ship and they analyze everything. But then something starts happening to Tom Paris. I actually was kind of scared. I had the lights turned off. I had to turn the lights on because it was pretty creepy. He started mutating. Spoilers for anybody who has not seen this episode. Heavy spoilers, because honestly, I don't want to spoil it for you. If you haven't seen it, stop this. Go check it out on Netflix. Great show. Great, you won't regret it. I promise you. And then come back here and watch the review. Because I guarantee you're going to be sitting there, chomping at the bit, watching the episode with me. I was horrified. As I said, I had to turn the light back on. What they did with that character, how they mutated him, the whole time you're sitting there kind of scratching your head, wondering what's going on. And I like that. Sometimes you can kind of follow what's going on with the story. Here, there was none of that. And I found that really interesting, especially for, Tom Paris. It just added so much depth to the story. And even though they never really refer back to this at any point in the series, for this episode, it was just, wow, jaw-dropping. So I found that really unnerving, the fact that this was almost like a horror story, except for the fact that it wasn't. Now, the thing that I found also really interesting was the fact that they brought up a secondary character. His name is Neelix. My dog is named after him, ironically enough. Um, and the one thing that I thought was really, really odd, and it should have been a dead ringer. Neelix is the cook on the ship, and a really, really good one. He kind of keeps the crew going. And you can tell that everybody just loves that character. I think it's kind of symbolic for how the fans feel. Um, but when he makes a thing of coffee for Tom Paris, um, Tom tastes it and he's like, oh, it doesn't taste very good. Which is really so out of character for everything that goes on. Neelix is like I said, he's such a important, integral part of the crew. That should have been a dead sign that something was off. Um, it wasn't. So again, this episode leaves you hanging. Um, you don't know what to expect at any point, and I like that. Um, it just wow, wow. Um, so when they finally put the um, easily escapable Paris near the warp core for the technobabble reason to reverse mutate him back, which I found really interesting when they were talking about it. Because again, you can never have too much technobabble. Now, I've always said that. Never have too much technobabble in your Star Trek. The common sense answers, no. Check that out. I don't want that. Don't put that in my Star Trek. Give me technobabble. The more confused I am, the more I want to think about it. That's my mentality. Technobabble your way out of a situation. That's the way to go. But so they technobabble. They try to technobabble their way out of it. It didn't work, of course, and so Paris escapes. And there was a very tense moment where Janeway is outside of a turbolift. They're trying to search for Paris, so they can't scan for him because the sensors are messed up. And the turbolift doors open. She kind of reaches for her phaser as she turns around, and he flops on her. It didn't really make sense why she passed out from a flop. I've flopped plenty of people, and they never do that. So to me, I kind of wondered, like, what? Huh? Like, was this some type of telepathy thing he had going on, or were there like weird spores going on? Because like it wouldn't make sense to put spores in Star Trek. Huh. So I kind of wondered, like what all did we do? Like, what was the problem with Paris? What did he do to her? Because it broke the common sense rule. So again, I'm on the edge of my seat. So he takes Janeway, puts her in the shuttle, and they zoom off. And of course, even though Voyager has reached warp 9.975 before, they get to 9.7 and the ship starts shaking. Structural integrity is going to be broken in 45 seconds, the computer says. Which, again, the computer would never tell you that before. Usually the engineer says something like that. But for argument's sake, the computer tells you. And it's bad when the computer has to tell you. That just says the engineer doesn't matter. So, again, I'm sitting there pulling what little hair I have left out of my head going, what? Just completely tense. And the shuttlecraft zooms off into warp 10. Completely transwarp. Like, wow. Which is infinite velocity. They're everywhere. Him and Janeway. Paris and Janeway. Just, wow, they could have gone anywhere. Are we ever going to see them again? And for the 3 seconds that we didn't know, I was honestly scared. Even though he had the rest of the season to go, like, what do we do? Are we going to even have a rest of a show? It was tense. It was really tense. But thankfully they didn't leave us hanging on too long. Some people like to. What they did in Best of Both Worlds, that was fine for what they did with Next Gen. Leave you an entire summer to think about what are they going to do with Captain Picard. Here they didn't do that. 3 seconds. Thank goodness. I don't know if my heart could have taken it. So they beam down to the planet. And you find out that Paris is evolving. And so now has Janeway into these salamander type things. And as I sat there and I was like, this isn't where I see evolution going with humanity. Doesn't quite make sense. It's kind of cool to know that we lose the ability to stand upright and we lose our tongues. And it's wow. Huh. Wow. It kind of gives you a glimmer of hope, because we don't need to stand up or wear clothes or anything. We just turn into like salamanders. Like, that's kind of cool. Like, wow, I would never have thought to do that. So to me, to have something that would have maybe organically made sense, they veered off into another direction. And that was good storytelling. Like that's what Voyager does on a weekly basis. So to me, when people say, "Oh, I love City on the Edge of Forever," or "I like the tensity of Best of Both Worlds," or "I like the complexity of In the Pale Moonlight," to me, it's Threshold. That's a Star Trek episode. The best one, I think. So, what do you think? Comment below, let me know.